Good morning, class. Today I will be responding to the claim made by Bernadette that fast fashion is detrimental to third world countries. The opponent's secondary claims are that 1, fast fashion's driven consumerism results in low wages for third world countries. 2, third world citizens are being exploited. And 3, fashion industry's impact is causing negative effects to the environment. My response to these claims are that the garment industry is crucial to third world countries' economic survival. Although the wages made by factory workers in the fashion industry are not ideal, if these factories cease to operate, these countries' economies and workers could be negatively affected. My response to the first claim is that although factory workers are paid low wages, it is one of the few opportunities people living in these poverty-stricken countries have to gain financial freedom, the ability to provide for their families, and the ability to make one's own decisions as a result of the financial freedom gained from earning a wage. Some challenging evidence that I found was that the advocate mentions that workers in fast fashion make less than $3 a day. Although this may be substantially low by our means, this is an opportunity for low-skilled workers to gain independence in a struggling economy, to save and send money back home to their families and send their children to school. In a report produced by the Center for Business and Human Rights at NYU School of Business, it states that, quote, since the arrival of the garment sector in the late 1970s to the country's poverty rate has fallen from 70% down to 40%, down to less than 40%. Accompanied by increases in life expectancy and per capita food intake. To the contrary, that although not ideal, being able to work and earn a living has benefited people living in third world countries to provide for themselves. Some challenges that I found with the reasoning was the advocate's reasoning says sourcing these low-skilled jobs to third world countries results in companies to profit more, but doesn't take into consideration the profits gained by these third world countries as a result of these exports. The freedom these jobs have granted to these workers according to them, and how cheaply made clothing are items priced at a low cost that more people can afford compared to higher quality items. In an article written for International Business Times, author Palash Jihaj states, quote, on the whole, apparel exports generates at least $20 billion in annual revenues, and is the largest source of foreign exchange earnings. Without textiles, Bangladesh, already burdened by immense poverty, would see its economy collapse. In the same article, Jihash quotes Mukta Malla, a 19-year-old seamstress' personal outlook towards her role in the factory. Quote, my life is much better than theirs because they have no freedom, when talking about the rural girls from her hometown. Another young female worker states, quote, I like it here in Dhaka. I make my own decisions, I can earn money and help my family. When she returns home to visit her village, the local girls envy and idolize her. They see me as a role model, I can do whatever I want, I can enjoy myself, I have freedom. My response to the second claim is that the advocate claims third world citizens are being exploited. However, many of these workers are making a decision themselves every day to work, even for low wages, to gain financial freedom and independence, especially in the case of women who are in a way exploited by their families in countries' age-old tradition of being arranged into marriages, often while underage. This type of exploitation forces women into relationships they may not agree with for financial security, but by having an opportunity to earn their own living in the fast fashion industry, they're more likely to take control of their lives and their future. Some challenging evidence. The advocate points to one unique example, the collapse of the Rana Plaza building in Bangladesh in 2013 that left over 1,100 dead, and makes a sweeping generalization from this that all workers are in unsafe working conditions. However, this incident was considered to be the worst and deadliest disaster to date in the garment industry to date. While there may be other fires that occur within faulty factories, there isn't enough evidence supplied to make the conclusion being made that, quote, factory collapses and factory fires are isolated to the factories used in producing clothes for fast fashion. And then my response to her third claim, the environmental impact of fast fashion is not seriously significant in comparison to other industries. Some challenging evidence was Evidence is provided that states textile materials are non-biodegradable, but according to evidence I found on fabricoftheworld.com, synthetic fabrics are able to biodegrade, but they take a long time to do so. There is also evidence provided that states there is a total of 68 pounds of textile waste a year, but this is not a lot of weight, and in comparison to this, the Environmental Protective Agency estimates the textile recycling industry recycles approximately 3.8 billion pounds of post-consumer textile waste each year. So this would mean that there is by far much more textile recycled in weight than there is sent to landfills. Overall, I believe that fast fashion industry is working to slowly improve conditions and that it is more beneficial to these countries and workers than it is detrimental. Opportunities for low-skilled workers in these countries are often limited, and having the chance to earning a wage helps to support them more than it would if these factors were not to operate. Thank you.
All right, organizational material is fine. It's easy to follow. You kind of recap what the advocate's argument was very clearly. On the first point, when you're talking about the wages, I thought you did a very good job suggesting that the wages that are paid in these places are providing an important positive economic impact. The notion that the wages are low is perhaps a matter of perspective, and to me the most impressive piece of information that you have is the one country. It doesn't specify what the country was, Gesundheit, where this statistic was applying. It might have been Bangladesh, it might have been someplace else, but the poverty rate went from 70% to 40% when the garment industry started operating there, and that the life expectancy increased and people ate more food, which all sounds like those are benefits, and the notion that these low wages are somehow problematic when they are creating these solutions to those kinds of problems, I think that's a really strong piece of information there. You then I can hear a little bit of this template going on here, the evidence challenge, reasoning challenge. You don't need to separate your arguments that way. There is an argument about whether or not the advocate's information is sufficient to prove the point that's being presented there. I don't know that it was actually a reasoning challenge. It really sounds like it is another argument in favor of the fashion industry being based there because the large number of people who get employed and the positive consequences. And I like the information on this, that I guess it's kind of bridging the gap between the exploitation on the second point and some of this harm that's presented on the first point, where women especially benefit because of this, that they are allowed to to grow, to have opportunities. And you've got a couple of examples of women in I think in particular in Bangladesh, where they are seen as being admirable. They control their choices. They're not sold off to somebody else as a way of earning income for the family. That kind of deals, like I said, kind of broaches the second point as well, where there's this whole argument that this is where you're developing that to some degree. In essence, fast fashion is now a feminist issue because it is providing women with the opportunity to operate autonomously and give them empowerment, preventing some of the exploitation that existed in those countries prior to these opportunities. I think that's a very good counterpoint that's being presented there. I don't remember what the exploitation argument was, other than the income issue that the advocate referred to in their original point. So the notion that something is exploitive, at least I think you give us a criteria by which we can evaluate that. And then the risk factor, when it comes to the dangers, I do think that you had a reasonable challenge to their reasoning here, where you suggest that they're using one case, and it's the worst case incident, in order to create a generalization from, and that seems to be a little bit problematic. I think that that's a reasonable press to make there. On the environmental laws, you did have a nice piece of evidence. I don't remember what the advocate's evidence on this point was, and without the comparison, it's hard for me to decide what position I would think is the true one in these circumstances. Of course, when we do the debates, the arguments will be side by side. We'll hear it almost immediately after the other side presents theirs, so that'll be a little bit easier. All right, thank you.